Uh, Thank you so much, Catherine. Uh, Welcome to Saturday here at the Dallas Literary Festival. If you have come for reading audiobooks in 2020, you are in the right place. For those of you that were hoping, as indeed I assume most of you were, that Fowzia Karimi would be joining us today, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the good news is you can listen to her because she recorded her audiobook, and I might be bringing her with us in spirit in little bits for the parts of the story that I know. So I'm Kendra Greene. I'm here with Kerri Arsenault and Toni Jensen. I thought I would give the most Texas introductions I could think of for these two individuals, which seems about right because Texas has been important for us. I met Toni Jensen at Texas Tech in a hallway during the Seoul Conference on Nature and the Environment. It is a beautiful, tiny conference. And I think maybe even before I met Toni, people were whispering, mentioning her, excited that she would be reading. And they didn't even dare to say that I had to know her. There was just buzz that she was going to be around. And once I met the work, clearly I needed to know more. Kerri and I met technically in Tampa at the end of a conference panel on mixtapes, poetry in the mixtape. We quickly met thereafter at Corsicana down at 100 West with the lovely hosts that are down there, and meeting Kerri not only in a room in a fraternal lodge that's more than 100 years old with those tall ceilings because no one had air conditioning, with a projection behind her of photographs cycling through as she read the first thing I'd ever heard, my first encounter with her work. These are perfect ways to meet people by them reading. And I'm going to give you little bits of our audiobooks as we go along. But I wanted to say, hi, Kerri. Hi, Toni. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Hi, Kendra. By the way, you have such a great radio voice. I mean, I haven't listened to your book on tape, speaking of, but your voice is so good.
One of the ways I convinced anyone to let me do it was that I had a little bit of background. I once, on a trip back to the airport, the van passed a Dallas institution reading and radio resource. And I just saw the sign and I thought, well, that's a thing I need to know more about. And they let me record a couple of YA books, a technical manual for cutting hair. And then I spent most Friday afternoons for the better part of a year and a half reading the USA Today on North Texas Radio for the Blind. And occasionally I got to sub and fill in for tabloid time.
Amazing. And Toni, what does your voice sound like?
My voice sounds like myself. A weird mix of all the years I lived in South Dakota and all the years now I've lived in the South, I would say, is what my voice sounds like for the most part. But no, I remember, Kendra, hearing you read for the first time at the SAL conference and thinking you had an amazing radio voice. And think of how many people have listened to your haircutting manual in the past year, probably, right? When we all needed to know how to cut hair. So
I need that manual right now.
That's amazing.
Well, I think a lot about the sort of twin inheritances that writers have, that we have an oral tradition that is right, presumably about as old as we could have made sound, maybe not even by ourselves, maybe hitting things or right, causing sound to be made. And then we've got this visual arts tradition, right? The text on a page, what it is to make a mark that has meaning. And they're right so rich and complicated and distinct, and yet we get to sit right at the crux of them the whole time. I may forget to play actual bits of audiobooks, so I'm going to try to get to that sooner rather than later. But Toni, can you talk about how you even got to do your audiobook in the first place?
It was very simple. In my case, it was the middle of the pandemic. And so I think they were having a difficult time figuring out how else it could be done. And they said, we listened to you read. There are a few clips on the internet. And they said, we think you would do okay. And that's was such staggering praise that how could I turn that down? No, I think it was as simple as if we could work out the logistics, And apparently the clips they heard weren't horrifying. And so here we go, pandemic, reading your audiobook. And I do, as you do, I think I have some training in public speaking and in theater as well. So yeah, I felt very comfortable doing it and accepting it. And it was a fun experience. I mostly enjoyed it.
All right, well, I'm going to try to catch people up. Friends, I'm going to deprive you. I'm not even going to give you the full amount of time that the penguin sample will give you, but we'll get started here if I have share sound, the most important part.
You do not photograph the men, but if you had, you might have titled it Father and Son Go Hunting. They wear camouflage and their mouths move in animation or argument. They have their windows down, as you have left those in your own car down the road. It is warm for fall. It is grouse season and maybe partridge, but not yet waterfowl. Despite how partridge are in the lexicon vis-a-vis pear trees and holiday singing, the birds actually make their homes on the ground. You know.
I was trying to find the pause and I'm not sure I managed. It strikes me, Toni, you, before writing this book of nonfiction, people might have been more familiar with your fiction. And listening to you, I hear such the lyricism, right? The poetry comes through so clearly. Would you tell us more about, I was gonna say, you and your room getting this sorted out and right, physically, where were you? How did this come to be?
So I enlisted the help of a lovely man named Daniel Kareth, who works at KUAF, which is our local NPR affiliate. And so I'd had a friend who'd worked there who'd recently left the station. And so she hooked me up with Daniel. And so it was Daniel and I in a small studio room at the local NPR affiliate, which is right across the street from our gorgeous Fayetteville Public Library here in Arkansas. And so, yeah, I mean, they were constructing on the gorgeous library, which is now about doubled in size. And so I would read a while and then it would be of the crane. And then I would read a while. It's also right by the police station. So there was police noise, there was crane noise, but otherwise it was a really wonderful experience. I mean, Daniel was charming and willing to sit in close proximity to an unmasked person and have them, read. It was a bold step. I thought it was very brave of him, and no one spread any COVID, and I read the book and it all went well.
Yeah. One of the reasons I thought it was important to have this panel, mostly because it would be so much fun, but I don't think I knew anyone who read their own audiobook until this year. And now, right, I know half a dozen people. And I'm not sure if there's something about 2020, if there was something leading up to us before we got here, but the fact that you end up in these isolated rooms with special air filtration, trying to reach people to make something accessible when so little isn't, really, I don't know, sort of rang for me, made me wonder if it's not so coincidental.
Yeah, I mean, well, go ahead. Toni, were you going to say something?
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I just have to say, I too is the same reason they said, oh, we saw you read something on the internet. So, well, you can read your own book. And I thought, well, who else is going to read my book? I don't know. It seemed odd to me. But being in the middle of the pandemic in a room alone, I was in a room alone. And in fact, I copied and pasted what the producer said to me. Here's what she said. It was so cold. She said, I will be on Skype and you will be in a sanitized booth with an engineer in the control room. No contact means you won't ever be physically in the same room with anyone. The gear will be wiped down and we'll communicate remotely. And I was like, I had a very existential crisis going, like it was 5 days straight from 10 to 5, mine was. And being in that room alone with nobody in the studio, it was a studio in Hell's Kitchen, but we can get to that later. But it was, yeah, I was like, I'm shouting into the void here. I felt like just talking to nobody, which is sort of a metaphor for the pandemic and all our books coming out during the pandemic. I mean, not that we're talking, I mean, there are 17 people here and we've had robust audiences for our books, but at the same time, you're not in a room with people. And so it was just like the start of things to come, I felt like, and it felt very strange, but at the same time, it was terrific practice for it all. Because I think of maybe about 70 events since my book came out online.
Well, and what an irony, right? That you were preparing for this profoundly intimate experience of being in someone's ear, and you accomplished that by being isolated. I had a director that was Skyping in, and then an engineer behind glass, and got a similar email about everything being wiped down. And furthermore, no one's here, right? We can only be open because we broadcast the news. Otherwise, this entire facility is empty. Everything is canceled. No one can be here. And you could tell from the parking lot that was true, that we were the only thing happening in this enormous building on the outskirts of Dallas.
Yeah, mine was not the only thing happening. I was in the middle of New York City in Hell's Kitchen. It was June and it was hot and everybody was outside, and it was a little, I don't know, it was a bit tetchy walking down the street. It was my first time sort of out of the house since March, and I was really nervous about going, but yeah, and then just to go into a sealed and vacuumed room, and then these two women who were my producers in my ears, and they would order me lunch, and it would be delivered with nobody there. It was just the most bizarre. It would just appear, I would eat, and it would disappear, and I would go back into the studio all by myself.
You sound like an astronaut in a science fiction.
That's what it felt like. I was in some weird, and then I'd go back to the apartment that somebody was lending me and just do the same thing. I'd order something for dinner, and it was all very existential, I think.
Kerri, I'm gonna bring us into that bit of existential by playing just a smidge from Milltown.
Thus nature will sort itself out. In this future, we will have forgotten everything that came before, and our only legacy for those who will supersede us is the promise of ruin. It started early, this ruining of bodies and the yawning of leaders who didn't care about a landscape so altered by us, it's reciprocating the abuse. When I walk along the Androscoggin and over its bridges, I try to see the river as it was or could have been. Even in its current spoiled state, it's still a thing of great agency. The transactions of its waters an awesome sight, wearing down granite and earth with the repeated force of its movement. Down at the rocky outcrops, when my father was a boy, a park with a bandstand and grassy plateaus wrapped the town with music and tranquility. There you can imagine the thunderous negotiation of the river's turbulent waters as they passed, defeating the submissive notes of flutes and clarinets.
I feel like I'm doing some baiting and switching. That don't you just want to sort of be carried along for the rest of the afternoon?
It's funny, I have to talk about my second existential crisis, and I would love to hear about Toni too. Kendra, you've had a little practice with this radio stuff, but I mean, in college, I was so terrified of public speaking that I actually failed the class because I wouldn't give an oral report. So when they said you're going to read your whole book for like 5 days straight, and I can mumble, I had a lot of French words in my book that I was like, oh no, now I have to know how to pronounce them. I had to learn French, and I'm sure it doesn't always sound great, but I was not terrified, but at the same time, it was the longest I had spoken in public. It's a bit strange for me, yeah, to be so present in front of people. I've gotten used to it, of course, since Zoom has done this to us all, but I don't know. Toni, did you have a lot of experience speaking?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with public speaking, and even the Zoom speaking, I've gotten used to that too. I really don't care for being recorded and having to listen to myself back. That's the part I don't care for. So that was the deal. I said, I'll agree to this, but will I have to listen to it and be any part of judging whether we do another take? Because if so, I'm out. You'll have to figure out a different way. I can't even listen to that little bit. There's just something about hearing me read a thing that I'm not happy about, because I never think it sounds very good. Whereas like listening to yours, Kerri, I thought, oh, she could read my audiobook next. That sounds great. And listening to mine, I thought, oh my God, you have allergies and you sound crackly, which is the case now that I live in Arkansas 100% of the time. It's just, there's always pollen. It is always pollen season. I thought, yeah, that's what's going on there with my voice. So I'm really critical, all of which is to say I'm really critical of how I sound, but I don't mind doing it. I don't mind doing it at all. No, and I've worked with other people. That was one of my first teaching jobs, was public speaking. So working with mostly, it was on Rosebud Reservation, and working mostly with older women who had never spoken in public before and didn't particularly think it was a good idea, and kind of coaching them through how to do it. And it was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. So I like the speaking, but I don't like the recording. Yeah,
it's funny. I feel like I sound better on a recording than I do in my own head. So to hear it back, I was like, oh, I wrote that. That's good. But
it sounded good.
I want to go back to something, Kendra, you said. Maybe you said at the beginning about the physicality, or you said that word and I just wrote it down, but I wanted to say that too, is that my writing, I feel like is very physical and muscular. And I read most of my book aloud to myself or to my poor patient husband as I was writing it over and over every night for like 8 years. So I did have a sense of rhythm and physicality to the writing that to read it, my own book, these are the only thing that made sense. I can't imagine somebody else having read it. So I'm glad they chose me, because I knew how I wanted to read it. I had done it so many times. But at the same time, while I was reading it, I thought, oh God, can I please take that word out? You were reading it. And I think because I would read it in parts, but then this is, if anybody here is publishing or reading their own book, I would read my entire book my next book. I'm going to read the whole book out loud for 5 days straight and to get all the junk out. It was so enormously helpful. I don't know what your experience was.
Yeah, I also think a lot about the conversation of it, or the rhythm of it, the sound of it. And yeah, piecemeal, all of it had been read out loud before, but all together is a totally different phenomenon. You were talking about the French in your book. The Icelandic, in writing about Icelandic museums, was so important. There were all these places where my editor and I would discuss it, and I felt so clearly, so strongly that the language needed to be there. It's what makes the place, that we needed to honor it. If anyone was actually trying to find these places, they needed to know what it was in the source. And so trying to get the Icelandic in first, if there was going to be a translation, and then having to be responsible for all of the Icelandic that I had put in this work out loud. Tinna Kvaran is, I think, the secret patron saint of the book, and definitely of the audiobook, for a series of Marco Polo voice memos in my phone, right, sitting on my thigh throughout the recording. And I'd see it coming. I'd see the word coming, and the engineer, the director, everyone knew we were going to pause, check to see what Tinna said, check to see what Tinna said, go for it.
I had the same thing every night. I would go back to the apartment and I would study the French words that I was going to read and like play them on the internet, over and over. And then it was weird. I would see the word coming at me down the manuscript and I would start to get a little sweaty, and then constant re-recording, I think for me, it was a little nerve-wracking.
I think I expected more re-recording. I was so heartened by the idea that there was a director, and I thought somebody would tell me, right, you're lifting up at the end of your sentences. Stop that. Nope, nobody tried to change the way I wanted to speak, for better or for worse.
Yeah, we should talk about. Well, yeah, I would love to hear your experience with that, like deep down, and like how we should tell people too that, I mean, you have headphones on, right? And I had 2 producers speaking in my ear the whole time. So I would be reading at a certain pace and they'd be like, okay, slow down. And then it was just like it was just like people in your ear. They were right in your ear telling you, do this, do that. Oh, no, you mispronounced that. And I was like, really? That's how I thought it was pronounced. You know, there's so many things that they would just be announcing into your ears. I don't know if everybody knows that, but.
Yeah, it was so much mispronouncing in my case. There's so many words I've used my whole life that I actually don't know. And now when I read the book aloud, I get to that word and there's a horrible gap because I have to think. I think, oh no, I've been saying this wrong my whole life. I have to remember when her voice was in my ear, as you're saying, you know, how did she tell me to pronounce it again? Oh, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But yeah, that happened repeatedly. Otherwise, I didn't get very many notes about slower or faster. It was street noise, you know, noise about, yeah, street noise, and then many a mispronunciation. Yeah. Timbre, apparently the timbre of one's voice is really timbre. I didn't know that. And that is maybe 3 times in the book. So that one I learned. The other ones, when I come across them, I still can't remember how they're actually pronounced. And so if I can skip them when I read them, I skip them. That's how I solve it.
The only one I'm sure of is, and I still am shocked that this is true, it is not the longest lived bird we know, it is the longest lived bird we know.
What? No, that's not true. No, it was, I mean, I don't know if I mispronounced as much as that they would just be like, I stumble over words. So they would just say, take it slowly. And I learned to read slower and careful, like actually look at the word. For anybody here who's interested in learning, it was just like, look at the word and say, you know, talking into the void, you know, read each word individually. You know, you've written the sentence, so you know how the rhythm is, but just to read each word, which sounds really basic, but it was that. And plus I practiced, I don't know about you, but I practiced. I mean, I read chapters before I got in to know what the tone or what my mode was going to be like. And then in the end, I was like, it's just going to be me. It's just going to be me. Or the tone, like I was like, I'm going to be sitting by a fire and telling you about my town. That's how I was going to read it, instead of being sort of poetry voice or like I didn't give dialogue. I didn't do different dialogue for people in the story. I was like, it's just going to be me talking to you, like having a beer or whatever. I don't know. Did you guys think about that stuff too? Like put yourself in a persona or?
I had to make sure that there was space between the tablet with the PDF that I was scrolling through and the microphone, and room to gesture.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think of it as being this like very excited, intense, nerdy friend telling you the thing that you really need to know, and have make sure I had room without bumping into things to let the body do that was the thing to think about.
That's interesting. I guess I didn't give it really nearly enough thought ahead of time. I will admit, I had read so many of them aloud because maybe 5 or 6 of them were published previously. And when I would go and do a reading, I would read one of them and talk about how the book would be coming out, et cetera, you know? So I thought I had like 5 or 6 in a almost 300-page book is really not very many. And I had, as you say, Kerri, I'd read them aloud many times while working on them. What I hadn't anticipated, and what I would say is probably important to think about, is to read aloud to yourself before you go in the final copy edited version, because some of mine changed in copy and some of mine changed several times from the original essay versions, which I'd read aloud, to being now chapters in a book, right? And so I was used to reading Women in the Fracklands and Kerri, those 2 essays in particular, a certain way, and they're different in the book than they are in the essay form. Plus, they've been copy edited fairly heavily, a couple of them. And so I would get to where I thought I was in the rhythm that I was used to, and I would stumble. And so it took me the longest to read the ones I thought I knew how to read. We had to stop more. And it was because they were different, just a little bit, you know, and those little differences in copy really made a difference in me being able to read them. Sometimes I find even now when I'm reading those aloud from the book in a reading, I stumble or I miss a word or I skip a part because I'm used to the old way. And so to get in the rhythm of the most current version, right? The published version, I think is probably, I wish I would have thought of that ahead of time.
Yeah, I was just handed what to read. I didn't have to think. It was nice. Macmillan set me up in a studio. I just showed up. They bought me lunch. They told me what to do. I was like a little robot. I was like, I was a space astronaut in my my little pandemic bubble.
Well, and thinking about the iterative quality of this, one of the things that happened in scrolling through, I realized that this tiny typographical problem that we'd had basically in every iteration of proofs. We kept thinking we'd gotten it, and then the next one would come out, and it wasn't. The Icelandic orthography, it has a letter that looks like RD with a bar through it. And we had a combination, presumably from my copying and pasting as I worked on a manuscript for 9 years, a straight backed version and a curved version. And recording the book 2 months, a little bit less before the publication date, noticing that the most recent version had been sent to me, a thing I wouldn't have had access to as a writer, that there's a point where they need to make you step away and stop thinking you can change things.
Right.
So it seemed very late to call my editor and say, I think even I went home the first day and didn't say anything. And the second day I was like, John, it's fine. It's fine. It's probably too late. I know that. But this thing is still a thing. And it was the day, that was the day to get it fixed. And we were able to do it just because someone gave me eyes on it one more time. And
yeah, there are many things I want to change. I keep emailing my editor now. I'm like, can I change this? Like, after listening to Toni, I did listen to the book because it helped me learn. It actually helped me really learn a lot about how the book wants, what I need to change, or if there's any errors, but also how I want to write. It made me, like, again, back to the physicality of writing. For me, it's so physical that having the voice come back at me, even though it's my own voice, I pretend it's somebody else, like, speaking for a minute, but it just helps me think about rhythm and writing and words that shouldn't be together ever, like it ends with a W and starts with a W or something. Like my husband's last name, for instance, his name is Andrew Wood. It's terrible. Like, say it 10 times fast, there are things like that you don't even think about when you're writing, but anyway, it helped me be more, just think about those things when I'm writing.
There are so many places I want this conversation to go, but I want to remind that the people who have joined us today, some of you have already found the chat. The rest of you are also welcome to find the chat. And I thought I'd start bringing in some of those questions. Sandra Bailey wanted to clarify whether we are readers for publishers, sort of professional readers, or reading our own books for audiobooks. And Sandra, we are the authors who got to read their own audiobooks, that sort of rarefied class. Although something interesting that stays with me that the engineer told me on some lunch break where we're on opposite sides of a room, I was asking about authors getting to read their own work. And in his experience, he said that it was pretty common that nonfiction authors get to, and really uncommon that anyone else does it.
I also got asked to do other books after I was done. I was like, I'm very busy right now, but which was kind of interesting. I would be interested in doing that, but I feel how strange that would be to read somebody else's work. I'm not sure.
It's so essential, if given the chance to spend this thing that you've been living with for so long, to have that thing that is already in your voice to be in your voice seems so essential, right? So
yeah,
if you've got the chance, a thing to do.
Because a lot of
Kerri, I kind of want you to say yes.
Maybe, I don't know, but it seems like, I don't know, that just seems kind of funny. But at the same time, I understand why authors of their books are not reading their own books. I mean, I've been to plenty of events as well as had my own events, and not everybody can read in a way that is compelling, I would say.
One thing most compelling, right? The idea of there are professional people who can do this for the book.
We are unprofessional. I mean, we're not normally doing this. The thing that was interesting that I heard feedback was people were disappointed, almost angry, some people, that I didn't have a Maine accent, because my book is largely in Maine. People were like, wait a minute, why did she lose her main accent? And I'm 53 years old and I haven't lived there since I was 18. So that might have something to do with it. But people were a little mad about it.
And I brought up the idea of reading my book after being sent the possibilities of people to do the reading for me. And the candidate they were looking at was Irish. And we had the discussion of, I mentioned, right, that I am an American, that I'm a Californian. Do you think that's an issue? And they said, no, it's an international book.
Interesting.
It just adds to that.
Huh. Oh, that's interesting. And you proposed yourself then?
I did.
Interesting.
I see more questions in the chat. There is the question, Helen wants to know if having an audiobook impacted overall sales.
I have no idea. I don't even know how my sales are doing for my regular book. I don't know. Does anybody know that information? I don't know.
I know I've looked and I know that they've sold some audiobooks, right? So it's helped some. It's not a very big percentage for mine, but still, they've sold some.
Yeah, Toni and I are both published by Penguin that has a pie chart for authors. So I think we could look it up and tell you the percentage of sales that the audiobook is, but
I would say, oh, sorry.
Oh, but how that compares to any sort of baseline or people that get one over the other.
Yeah.
I've had people anecdotally who mentioned that they've gotten both and either experiencing them at the same time or have different purposes for. There are times you want to listen to things and times you don't. I have a friend that says I'm very soothing when she wants to fall asleep.
That's what I use your book for too, Kendra. I just put it on like a little yoga tape. No, just kidding. Yeah, I had the same thing. People buy both versions, which I'm quite pleased about. Double sales are great. I mean, I have no idea about my sales. I'm sure it's impacted. I'm sure they've sold some. I think because people have told me. Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I'm in the dark.
Rachel says, I would love to know to what extent your out loud reading was an interpretation. If you had intoned it differently, would it have another meaning? Rachel, this is a great question. Thank you.
It is. I mean, it wasn't. Go ahead, you go.
I was going to say, because there are the places of ambiguity, right? There's insofar as it is written as a piece of visual meaning, that there's delight, there's purpose in setting up places where there's ambiguity, where there's sort of a deadpanness, right? There are so many effects that you specifically achieve on the page, and having to commit to one intonation, absolutely, right, is a different experience.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I heard from a few people who listened to the audiobook who said, and who also had bought the book, or had read some of the essays in print and said that they had wondered whether I meant for a couple of places to be humorous, right? And when I read it aloud, then they could tell that it was humorous. So I must have been doing, the intonation okay, because it's not a very funny book. It's about guns and gun violence, but here and there, you do still need levity. And so I think that's why people are sort of nervous to interpret something as funny in a book like that. But yeah, I mean, here and there things were funny and I meant them humorously. And they said, oh, I could tell that you meant for that to be funny. So I was glad that came across.
Well, that makes me think of like the crossover of things that you learn through event readings that then apply to audiobooks. I think about how if there is something funny, how vital it is that you establish that early, that you teach people that it's okay to laugh at the first instance, or they're going to be very polite and quiet the rest of the time.
Yeah, I mean, my book's about environmental destruction, and so many people are like, even the governor of our state was like, oh, it's just such a downer book, I don't want to read it, but it's funny. And I think the intonation, as far as intonation, I just read it how I wrote it in my head. Like I write with musicality or rhythm in my head, so I just, it's all, fortunately or unfortunately, what is in my head is now on my audiobook. I don't know. It depends. Is anybody here listen to it? Let me know.
Kerri, you've got some pictures. Would you mind setting up the sharing screen while I address, Stephen has asked, Stephen used to do reading for the blind until the studio closed down. Hey, Stephen, is there a place in Dallas to do that? This might be a place where the audience knows better than I do. When Reading and Radio Resource shut down, it wasn't clear that there was an heir apparent, though one assumes there's still need. Kerri, your studio came with a cat.
Yes, so this is, I should say, this is one of my producers. I said, please, I want to know. I just felt so detached from everybody and who was talking to me and being so kind to me this for 5 days in a row. I felt very intimate with them. And I was like, who are you? What do you look like? And I was so happy to get this picture because it's like a dream. Look at this. Look at her office. So, there's her cat. She was wonderful. You can see her, she's got like 2 computers going and the iPad that she was directing me on. So that's Maddie, she's at Macmillan. And here is another picture, if I can. This is a close-up of what she's looking at as we're reading, just so people understand. And this, again, I don't think this is typical. I don't know. Nothing is typical, right? I published my book September 1st. Typical. I don't know what it's like other than to be like locked in a room by myself. So, yeah, and she's like monitoring the sound. There it is a little bit. There's my book. And this was the other producer. She sent me her workspace. I really wanted to write about this. I still may, in a very to really think about sort of the metaphor of it all and just being alone with your words really as a writer. And I was listening to Ben Fountain right before this. He was talking about both the sort of what it's like to be alone to be a writer, but also about community and how important that is. And that's the main thing I've been seriously missing this year is a community. Even though we can be here, there's nothing like, hugging or slapping you on the back or having a beer. There's me in the studio with my backpack of beverages to drink. They were like, don't get thirsty. So, and it was middle of summer, but it was freezing in there. Of course, my fingers were icicles, so I had to wear like a jacket.
I also see you in your outfit. I remember paying a lot of attention to what did I own that would be okay in a cold room and make no noise, right? No rustling of corduroy or anything.
Right, exactly. I wore a sweatshirt, it was just cotton. It was very soft. And yeah, we should talk about that too. And this is walking around New York City. Like it was, midsummer and it was just graffiti. It was, Black Lives Matter. There was a lot. It was like being in New York City in like 1982. This should be the subtitle of New York City for that summer. Greed is bad. Anyway, those are just a few pictures wanted to share.
And we've got 10 minutes remaining for those of you that were thinking about sneaking in your questions. Phyllis asks, as far as having the author read, why do you think nonfiction and fiction reading is approached differently? And I think, Toni, you're the most cross-genre of us. So I'll be interested in what you have to say. I've been thinking about this for almost a year now since I knew this was a thing. I've got a theory that fiction does a certain kind of world building, that it's more akin to playwriting. And that's why you end up with an actor who does the reading, and that nonfiction is a bit more of a monologue.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think of a writer like Pam Houston, who talks about how her fiction is very autobiographical, right? So I think there are probably some fiction writers who could read their work because it has those non-fictional elements. But yeah, mine doesn't necessarily, my fiction. Some of it does, but not entirely. So I think, yeah, having an actor do it would help to build the world. And sometimes too, you have different narrative voices, right? Sometimes a novel, you'll have 2 or 3 narrators, and to have an actor who could think about delivering that maybe through nuances, right? Each voice being a little different, that kind of a thing. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about duration. Kerri, you were there for 5 days.
From 10 to 5 every day.
Yeah, I remember getting that there were these warnings. People really needed me to understand that it looks like fun, but this is hard work. No one is really in the training for it, right? Every day when we think we could just push, we could get one more chapter in, we would always then sit back and be like, we'll pick it up tomorrow. It's fine. Right. And that was, they set aside 3 days. We did it in 2.5, could have squished it into 2 if we'd needed to. But if at 2.5 days, they were like, whoa, 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 no one is used to talking this loud or talking so much for so long, that it's asking a lot of the body, it's asking a lot of the mind, it's asking a lot of the voice.
I did not feel that way. I felt
I didn't either. Well,
I was like,
this
is fun, you know. I don't know. I didn't. Yeah. What did you say?
Toni, I would think you're in a similar position of, I teach, I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I really did feel like I could, and I could. I think we got done in 3 days, and then I had to come back for an hour to do retakes because of all the aforementioned noise. But also, I enjoyed it because I had an actual person who I got to know, and now we're friends. I was just in there yesterday doing a podcast thing for QWERTY Podcast because I didn't have the right technology at home, and Daniel said, "Sure, come on over." And we've had a porch drink one time, since then. So I made a friend, and it was lovely. He was good company, and it was nice to sit there for 3 days. Mostly, it was cold, as you all were saying, but mostly I enjoyed it. It wasn't a slog.
No, I didn't think so. Everybody said it was so hard. Drink all this water, all this, your voice is going to hurt. It didn't. I would go out. I met with a friend of mine, go for 8-mile, 11-mile walks in New York City after recording and talk more. And you'd be like, rest your voice. I'm like, whatever. I mean, I think part of too, our voices, I mean, Toni, yours is similar. We have kind of this kind of creak in our voice, but I think that's what makes it a little compelling to our projects. It's part of what the voice is. And it's just, it is what it is. I don't know, Kendra, your voice is perfect. So I don't know. Did you, it really is. Did you play a piece of yours, by the way, Kendra?
No, well, we can find that.
We should. Because I'm curious.
And if we switch, sorry, the tab is underneath where I need to be. So they arranged for his passage to North America, a very long time on a ship. As the sailing date drew near, the boy was too sick to journey. But everything was arranged and someone had to go, so they sent a different, even younger son in his place. Relatives in North America dutifully met the ship, but when they could not find the name of the first son on the manifest, could not find the boy they had come for, and did not know to look for another, they went home empty-handed. It did not... More darkness around here today.
I want you to read my next book. It's so good.
I think we should all just rotate.
That's so good. I'm like,
right, I'll read yours, you'll read Toni's, Toni will read mine.
Your pronunciation is beautiful. I just mumble through stuff.
There's no world in which anything's improved by me reading yours, Kendra. No. That's not how that's gonna go. No.
I want to sneak in the 5 minutes that we have left. There's sort of 2 things I wanted to get to. Partly I was thinking about modality, right? Kerri, you brought pictures this summer when I was looking around at these remarkable writers I loved making their audiobooks. One of the things I noticed was their connection to visual arts, right? Kerri, you had the slideshow projected the first time I saw you read. Same for Fowzia Karimi, right? This was exactly how we met. And she's the first audiobook that local indie Deep Vellum has ever done. Right? She was the first work that was an English original. This book that is not just written, but illuminated and designed, right? The object is by this one remarkable maker. And thinking about how, I wonder if there's something there that people that are drawn to not just the writing, but to a visual sense also hear some sort of auditory call. I feel like I wrote to you, Toni was like, Toni, what's your visual practice that's never come up before? What do I need to know?
I don't have much of a visual practice, but I will say there's a lot of birds. There are a lot of birds in the book, and I did a lot more walking and studying birds. And that became a part of my practice. So if I didn't notice a bird and look up a bird fact and take pictures of birds and those sorts of things, I'm a terrible photographer, so they never make it onto the internet. But yeah, that became part of my practice during this book that I hadn't done before.
And I think for me, I'm like I said, my writing and my practice is very physical. So the audio and the photographs. I have 33 photographs in my book too. So it's that's actually how people are like, how do you write that sentence? I'm like, I don't know. I look at a picture and words pop into my head. That's literally how it works. Like, I don't know. It's magic. But the audio too is important for me too. And I when writing my book, even just thinking, going to my town over and over and listening to the noises. In fact, a motorcycle just went by, the Doppler effect of a motorcycle, which is actually in my book. That sound, every time I hear it, because we lived on this road where that happened all the time, I hear that sound, it makes me think of home. Like there's a lot of auditory cues for me as a writer, and as well as the physical. So to me, this seemed, it made a lot of sense for me. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, but
Well,
if
we
there
will have
was a
the
question.
lightning round for when I think when I first pitched this panel to you all, it was essentially, how would you feel about discussing all of the noises a body can make once there are professional people in a well-mic'd room paying attention? Right, like my director, who right over Skype was talking about how she doesn't allow carbonated beverages in the room, right? That there's so many things that make noises. I think Fowzia had a similar experience to you, Toni, of the noise outside, and then you pick up again, right? The noise outside, and then you pick up again. Are there things you know about sound or about the body that you did not know before?
Well, one thing, you probably can see me, I wriggle a lot in my chair, but I actually have I have two pulled muscles on my ass, basically. So that's what makes me wiggle around so much. And I've been going to physical therapy and everything, but that was problematic for the I get really uncomfortable sitting here in a lot of ways. So I realized how much I move when I'm writing and working, and I didn't realize I moved so much. And I had to stop that. I had to like paralyze myself for one thing, and put a pillow over my stomach because I would get hungry, and it would just quiet the noises. But I didn't have so much. People said, eat enough and drink enough. No way. I kept empty because I didn't want any sounds coming out of my stomach except for water. Like,
boy, I had a lot of snacks, and the snacks, because when my stomach growls, you can hear it in another room sometimes. It's very, very loud. And so I had like little snacks throughout when we would take a break. And then what I would say I would not advise, I live pretty close to the studio, so I would drive home and eat lunch and drive back in the hour. And that meant I ate really fast. And then your stomach also makes a lot of noise. And so, yeah, I would not do that again. I would take the sandwich and sit in the parking lot or whatever weird thing was necessary, because that seemed impossible. And I also have a bad spot in my back, and so was moving around and shifting, which is never a problem in a regular Zoom, but is a problem reading your audiobook. Yes, for sure.
right.
Yeah, I had to knock that off. And then I had to go home and stretch for like an hour and take a walk. And
I was terrified of masticating. Like, I was like, I hate when people do that when they're reading. Thank God I did not do that.
Well, we need to wrap up, give people a chance to stretch and get their own snacks and drinks of water. In parting, Helen wants to know, what projects do you have in the works? And lest I forget to say it, Kerri, Toni, thank you for having this conversation with me. I've been dying to have it for ages. Catherine, thank you for keeping an eye on us. And we will quickly answer this question and officially say goodbye. What's the project you have in the works, friends?
Biography of an Ordinary Woman, nonfiction.
I'm working on a novel, Cowboyistan.
A bestiary of essays, Love, Two Devils, and the Universe.
Okay, all of these books sound amazing. Let's get on the phone and talk about them together, shall we?
Please.
Yes.
I look forward to seeing you again. Audience, thank you for coming. SMU, thank you for hosting.
Yes.
Enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thanks, Kendra. Thanks, Toni.